Mr. Speaker, we need to act now to save the planet from surpassing an average global temperature increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Just yesterday, the World Meteorological Organization released data sounding the alarm that we will surpass 1.5 degrees Celsius in warming in 2027. Recently, Quebec became the first jurisdiction in the world to explicitly ban oil and gas development. This will not only end petroleum exploration and production in Quebec, but also ban the public financing of it. The leader of the Green Party and member for Fredericton-South has tabled a bill that would make New Brunswick a climate leader by becoming the second jurisdiction to ban oil and natural gas exploration and development. Will the Premier support this initiative to do what the science says we need to do and end our reliance on fossil fuels?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you for the question. And Mr. Speaker, I guess, I traveled to Europe last week and I learned a lot about the state of the climate and the state of the issues in energy in Europe. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things that was very relevant was certainly I was within 2 hours of the Ukrainian crisis and the conflict. And now it's number, let's say, 4 or 5 on our news cycle, Mr. Speaker, because we've lost that sense of urgency. And so I wanted to talk about what I learned there about all the gaps that are in the system for energy security and energy supply, and we're not immune to that. And I want to go back to a point that the leader of the Green Party made a few minutes ago, because, the idea of every industry becoming greener and cleaner is being able to take advantage of, let's say, federal initiatives like carbon credits in the sense. So we could really use the leaders' help in relation to having the refinery qualify for the carbon credits because they want to invest it in hydrogen production, Mr. Speaker. And that's where they're going to put the money. And every industry wants to do that and be treated fairly by the federal rules. So we could work together on something that will help reduce emissions here in our province and going forward, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Memramcook-Tantramar.
Mr. Speaker, what is it that this Premier doesn't get about leaving fossil fuels in the ground? What does this Premier not understand about the International Energy Agency saying we must not build any new fossil fuel infrastructure? What is it he doesn't get about the fact that fracking creates greenhouse gas emissions? It cannot be responsibly developed, as the Premier claims. To even consider it, when to quote the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, "We are headed for a global catastrophe," is among the most irresponsible things you could do. It's reckless. It's unacceptable. Considering the alarming warnings from scientists, the lack of consultation with First Nations, and the lack of social license from New Brunswickers, how can the Premier support the creation of a shale gas industry on unceded and unsurrendered Wabanaki territory?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what I think the conversation needs to understand is what are the options currently, Mr. Speaker, to maintain energy security, and how do we reduce emissions at the same time? And not to get into the debate here in the case of shale gas development, Mr. Speaker, but when the companies I talk to in Europe, they're focused on LNG to shut down coal plants. It's the single biggest impact they can have on society and still provide an energy. And they can do this around the world. And here we're sitting with 4 or 5 coal plants running in Atlantic Canada. And we could shut them down tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, or within a year, and reduce emissions by 15–20%. So, Mr. Speaker, the whole issue is let's look at all of the puts and takes in relation to energy supply, and let's look at how we transition and move, and let's look at how we can do this in the most productive way in reducing emissions all along the way and making it work, Mr. Speaker, because that's the challenge. We should all be looking at the same formula of how do we meet the challenges. We all have the same target, cleaner, greener environment, Mr. Speaker.